The moment the helicopter went down wasn't loud in the way movies make it. There was no dramatic pause, no slow-motion hero shot. It was chaos compressed into seconds. A sharp crack in the air. A violent shudder that ran through metal and bone. Then the sound every pilot and operator knows means something has gone terribly wrong. The engine tone changed. Not failed yet, just wounded, like an animal that knows it's been hit. Inside the cabin, training took over before fear had time to speak. Hands reached for straps. Boots braced against the floor. Someone shouted a command, not panicked, just loud enough to cut through the noise. The helicopter dipped hard to the left, then corrected, then dipped again, lower this time. Dust and debris whipped up from the ground below as the pilot fought for control, pulling, adjusting, buying seconds. Those seconds mattered. Because this wasn't a crash into friendly territory. This wasn't a hard landing near a base or a road. This was deep inside hostile ground, where every shadow could hold a rifle, and every second on the ground increased the odds that someone was already moving toward the sound of trouble. When the helicopter finally hit, it wasn't graceful. Metal screamed. Gear slammed forward. Bodies absorbed impact they'd never fully forget. The rotors struck dirt and debris, sending fragments outward like shrapnel. Then silence rushed in, heavy and unnatural, broken only by the ticking of hot metal and the hiss of leaking fuel. No one waited to be told what to do next. The door was already being forced open before the dust settled. Weapons came up, not aimed wildly, but pointed where experience said danger would appear first. Eyes scanned tree lines, rooftops, ridges. The downed helicopter wasn't cover. It was a beacon. Smoke curled upward, visible for miles, announcing their presence to anyone who hadn't already heard the crash. This was the moment every plan quietly died. All the careful timing, the clean insertion, the smooth extraction window written into the briefing folder meant nothing now. There was no ride home waiting on a clock. No guarantee another bird could get in. No assurance the enemy hadn't already called in reinforcements. But there was also no hesitation. Because the truth is, this moment wasn't unexpected. Not this exact hill or this exact night. But the idea of everything going wrong had been drilled into them for years. Training had already taken them here, again and again, in deserts, swamps, mountains, and cold black water. The instructors had failed their gear on purpose, taken away maps, changed objectives mid-mission, shot at them with blanks and live rounds until stress felt normal. So when the helicopter went down, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like confirmation. This was the part where weak plans break and strong people don't. Where titles don't matter and rank is carried in tone, not patches. Where every movement becomes deliberate because wasted motion now costs lives. They spread out instinctively, creating distance without losing connection, reading each other without speaking. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then another. The enemy would come. That was guaranteed. The only unknown was how fast and how many. What mattered now wasn't the loss of air support. It was what remained. Weapons still worked. Radios still functioned, mostly. Legs still moved. Minds were clear. The mission hadn't changed just because gravity had done its job. As the smoke thickened and the heat from the wreckage grew stronger, one operator took a last look at the helicopter, not with regret, but calculation. It had delivered them this far. That was enough. Machines fail. People adapt. They melted away from the crash site with purpose, every step taking them farther from the illusion of safety and deeper into the reality they were trained for. Knowing the enemy would later walk through twisted metal and scorch marks and assume the crash had ended the fight. Not realizing this was the exact moment it truly began. Being isolated behind enemy lines isn't about distance on a map. It's about the sudden understanding that there is no immediate rescue coming, no backup just minutes away, no friendly perimeter you can fall back into if things go wrong. It settles in quietly, usually right after the noise fades and the team realizes the only sounds left are their own breathing and the environment around them. The terrain doesn't feel neutral anymore. Every tree becomes potential concealment for someone watching. Every path could be an ambush route. Even the ground under your boots feels different, uneven in a way that reminds you this place was never meant to support you. The team moves carefully, spacing themselves out, avoiding silhouettes, using shadows like second skin. Communication changes when you're cut off. Radios are kept low, brief, almost surgical. No one talks unless they have to. Hand signals take over. Glances carry full conversations. Everyone knows the cost of a mistake out here. A dropped magazine, a snapped branch, a careless beam of light could be enough to bring a fight they can't afford on terms they didn't choose. Isolation sharpens the senses in uncomfortable ways. Smells seem stronger. The damp earth, burning fuel from the crash still clinging to gear, the faint trace of smoke that might give them away. Sounds stretch out in the dark. Footsteps echo longer than they should. A distant voice feels closer than it is. Sleep becomes a luxury no one expects. Only short rests taken one eye open, weapon within reach. Time behaves strangely. Minutes drag, yet hours vanish without warning. There's no schedule anymore, no clear marker for when the next phase begins. The mission timeline has dissolved, replaced by a constant assessment of risk versus necessity. Move now or wait. Push forward or hold ground. Each decision made without the comfort of higher command watching over them. Behind enemy lines, identity narrows. There's no room for ego, no space for personal fears. Everyone becomes a role, a function the team depends on. The medic isn't just a medic. He's survival. The communicator isn't just carrying a radio. He's the last thread connecting them to the outside world. If that thread snaps, they know it might be days before anyone even knows where to start looking. The enemy owns the advantage here. They know the roads, the trails, the rhythms of the land. They blend in, disappear, reappear somewhere else entirely. The team assumes they're being watched even when there's no proof, because assuming otherwise is how people get killed. Every movement is planned with the expectation of contact, even when none comes. Yet isolation also strips away noise. There's a strange clarity that forms when options are limited. Distractions fade. The only things that matter are staying alive, staying hidden, and staying together. Trust deepens, not through words, but through repeated proof. A teammate covers an angle without being asked. Someone hands over water without a glance. Security is rotated without debate. Hunger creeps in slowly. Thirst follows. Gear feels heavier with each mile, but no one complains. Complaints belong to places where comfort exists. Here, silence is a form of discipline. Pain is acknowledged only when it interferes with movement. Fear is managed the same way, noted, controlled, never allowed to lead. Night offers cover, but also danger. Visibility drops. Depth perception lies. Friendly shapes blur into threats until confirmed. The team tightens its spacing, moving like a single organism, adjusting pace to the slowest member without discussion. No one is left behind, not because it's a rule, but because it's instinct. Being isolated behind enemy lines doesn't break them. It reveals them. Stripped of support, stripped of certainty, they rely on what can't be shot down or jammed or destroyed. Training becomes muscle memory. Discipline becomes comfort. The bond between them becomes the only perimeter that matters. Training that replaces technology doesn't begin with advanced gear or classified equipment. It starts with subtraction. Take away GPS. Take away air support. Take away night vision, radios, even watches. Strip everything down until the operator is left with nothing but a body, a mind, and a team. Then the real instruction begins. From the outside, it can look excessive, even outdated. Why learn land navigation by stars when satellites exist? Why memorize procedures for equipment failure when modern systems are reliable? But reliability is a comfort, not a guarantee. Training assumes failure as the default state. If something can break, it eventually will, usually at the worst possible moment. So they practice lost. Not simulated lost, but genuinely unsure of position, given limited information and forced to figure it out. They learn terrain the slow way, by walking it, feeling elevation changes in their legs, reading soil and vegetation, noticing how water flows, and where people are likely to travel. Technology can tell you where you are. Training teaches you where you're going. They train exhausted. Sleep deprivation isn't a side effect, it's a tool. Decisions are made after long movements, under weight, in heat and cold, when the mind wants shortcuts. Instructors watch closely, not for speed, but for judgment. Anyone can perform when rested. The test is whether discipline survives fatigue. Weapons fail on purpose. Magazines are damaged. Optics are knocked out of alignment. Batteries die without warning. When it happens, no one stops the evolution. The expectation is immediate adaptation. Transition to irons. Fix the malfunction by feel. Move, communicate, continue. There's no pause for frustration. Emotion is wasted energy. Medical training is the same. Tourniquets are applied in the dark, with one hand, while moving. Casualty drills are run until the steps no longer require thought. Pain is introduced not to glorify suffering, but to normalize function under stress. When blood is real later, it won't be a shock. Navigation, shooting, medicine, communication, all are trained under conditions designed to remove certainty. Weather changes plans. Instructors inject chaos. Orders shift mid-mission. Objectives are added, removed, reversed. The lesson is simple. The plan is a suggestion. Adaptation is the requirement. Technology is still used, but never trusted alone. A radio is a tool, not a lifeline. A drone is information, not truth. They are taught to confirm digitally gathered data with human observation. Eyes, ears, and judgment carry more weight than screens. Team training matters more than individual excellence. They rotate roles constantly, so no one becomes dependent on a single specialty. The point is redundancy through people, not equipment. If one goes down, another steps in without ceremony. Ego has no place here. Competence does. Repetition builds confidence, but not arrogance. The confidence comes from knowing that even stripped down, they function. They've been cold, wet, hungry, and disoriented before, and still completed the task. The body remembers this when panic tries to surface. There's also an unspoken lesson woven through it all. Technology can make things easier, but it can also make people fragile. Over-reliance dulls awareness. Comfort breeds hesitation when comfort disappears. Training hardens the mind against that shock. When the helicopter goes down and screens go dark, nothing essential is lost. Movement continues. Security is set. Decisions are made. Not because the situation is ideal, but because it is familiar. They've lived in that discomfort by design. Training that replaces technology doesn't reject modern tools. It ensures that when those tools fail, the mission doesn't. What remains is something that can't be jammed, hacked, or shot out of the sky. Skill, judgment, trust earned through shared hardship. Leadership under fire doesn't announce itself. There's no speech, no dramatic assumption of control. It shows up in the first few seconds after things go wrong, when confusion threatens to spread and someone's voice cuts through it with calm direction. Not louder than necessary, not rushed, just steady enough to anchor everyone else. In those moments, rank matters less than presence. The person leading may not be the highest ranking on paper, but they are the one everyone naturally looks to. They read the situation quickly, not just the terrain or the enemy, but the team itself. Who's shaken? Who's injured? Who's ready? Decisions are shaped around people as much as plans. Under fire, clarity becomes currency. Orders are short. Simple. Move here. Cover that. Hold. Every extra word is a risk. The leader's job is to reduce noise, not add to it. They filter chaos so the team can function inside it. Fear exists, but it's managed. A good leader doesn't pretend danger isn't real. They acknowledge it without feeding it. Their calm isn't performative. It's practiced. Years of controlled exposure to stress have taught them that panic spreads faster than bullets. If their voice wavers, others will too. Responsibility sharpens in these moments. Leadership under fire means owning every outcome, good or bad. If a decision fails, there's no blame passed down the line. Adjust and move. The team watches closely. Trust is built when leaders absorb consequences instead of deflecting them. Adaptation becomes constant. Information changes by the second. The leader listens as much as they speak, pulling in reports, weighing risks, updating direction without hesitation. Stubbornness kills. Flexibility saves. The best leaders are decisive without being rigid. They also know when not to lead. Sometimes the smartest move is stepping back and letting a specialist take control of a narrow problem. A medic runs medical. A breacher handles entry. Leadership under fire is about orchestration, not domination. Tone matters. A single word can steady a shaken teammate. A glance can communicate confidence when time doesn't allow explanation. Leaders pay attention to the small things. A dropped shoulder. A rushed movement. They correct without humiliating. Reinforce without praise that feels out of place. There's an invisible line leaders walk between speed and caution. Move too fast, and mistakes multiply. Move too slow, and initiative is lost. Finding that balance isn't taught in manuals. It's learned through repetition and failure. Under fire, that instinct surfaces. Leaders also protect focus. They shield the team from distractions, filtering information upward and downward. Not everyone needs to know everything. Oversharing can paralyze. The leader decides what matters now and what can wait. Personal comfort disappears. Leaders eat last, rest last, and carry more than their share without comment. Not because it's expected, but because it sets a standard. The team notices. They always do. When casualties happen, leadership becomes even more visible. The leader doesn't freeze or emotionally unravel. They acknowledge the loss, adjust the plan, and keep the team moving. Grief is real, but survival comes first. There will be time later, or there won't. Leadership under fire isn't heroic in the cinematic sense. It's practical. It's heavy. It's lonely. Decisions are made with incomplete information and irreversible consequences. Doubt is present, but it can't be indulged. What separates effective leaders in these moments is preparation. Not just tactical knowledge, but self-knowledge. They know how they react under stress. They've confronted their own fear before it mattered. That awareness keeps them steady when others look to them for direction. In the end, leadership under fire is less about commanding and more about holding the line mentally, creating a pocket of order inside chaos where the team can operate. When the shooting starts and everything else falls away, that steady presence becomes the most valuable weapon they carry. Adaptation, when plans collapse, begins with a hard truth. The original plan is gone. Not delayed. Not partially usable. Gone. Holding onto it out of pride or habit is how teams get trapped in bad decisions. The fastest adapters accept reality without emotion and move forward from what is, not what was supposed to be. When the plan breaks, there's a brief moment of mental friction. Everyone feels it. That pause where the mind wants to rewind time, replay decisions, assign fault. Well-trained teams don't indulge that instinct. They acknowledge the failure silently and redirect energy into the next workable action. Adaptation is not improvisation without structure. It's controlled flexibility. The mission objective still exists, but the path to it changes. Sometimes drastically, sometimes uncomfortably. The ability to reframe the goal in practical terms separates survival from success. The first step is simplification. Strip the situation down to essentials. What do we need to accomplish right now? What do we have? What can we no longer rely on? By reducing complexity, the team creates space to think under pressure. Communication tightens. There's no room for speculation or over-explaining. Ideas are offered quickly, evaluated just as quickly, and either executed or discarded. Ego doesn't get a vote. The best idea wins, regardless of who speaks it. Adaptation demands trust. Team members must believe others are competent enough to take initiative without permission. Micromanagement slows response and creates bottlenecks. Leaders give intent, not instructions, and trust their people to act within that framework. Momentum matters. Stopping completely is rarely an option. Movement, even imperfect movement, keeps the team from becoming reactive. Adapting on the move feels risky, but standing still in a dynamic threat environment is often worse. Risk calculation changes when the plan collapses. What was unacceptable before may become necessary. What was preferred may no longer be possible. Adaptation is about choosing the least bad option and committing to it fully. Failure is redefined. Not achieving the original plan is no longer failure. Losing the ability to act is. Adaptable teams measure success by continued agency, not perfect outcomes. There's also emotional discipline involved. Frustration is natural, but it can't be allowed to steer decisions. Leaders set the tone by remaining focused and forward-looking. Dwelling on what went wrong only increases the chance of further mistakes. Adaptation relies heavily on preparation done long before the crisis. Teams that have trained under uncertainty recognize patterns faster. They've practiced making decisions with incomplete information. When the real moment arrives, it feels familiar rather than overwhelming. Individual creativity becomes valuable here, but it's bounded by discipline. Wild ideas aren't useful if they introduce new risks the team can't manage. Adaptation is innovation constrained by reality. Resources are reimagined. Equipment designed for one purpose is used for another. Terrain once avoided becomes an asset. Time itself becomes a tool, stretched or compressed based on necessity. Adaptation also requires letting go of perfection. Conditions are rarely ideal. Decisions are made with the understanding that adjustments will follow. This creates a cycle of action, assessment, and correction that keeps the team ahead of events rather than chasing them. When plans collapse, leadership becomes about permission. Permission to change course. Permission to abandon sunk costs. Permission to do what works rather than what was written. Teams that adapt well don't ask whether the new plan matches the old one. They ask whether it keeps them alive and moving toward the objective. In those moments, adaptability stops being a skill and becomes a mindset. A quiet confidence that no matter how bad things get, there is always another option if you're willing to see it and act on it. Victory without extraction forces a different definition of success. It means the mission is no longer tied to getting picked up, flown out, or rescued on schedule. The absence of an exit doesn't negate the objective. It sharpens it. What matters is what was accomplished, not how clean the departure looked. Without extraction, time stretches and compresses at the same time. There's no clock counting down to a helicopter arrival. No fixed window that dictates movement. Instead, time is managed by exposure and opportunity. Stay too long and risk discovery. Move too fast and miss what matters. Every decision weighs progress against survival. Victory in this context is quiet. There's no signal flare or confirmation call that instantly closes the chapter. Success may not be immediately visible. Sometimes it's knowing that something didn't happen because you were there. A route wasn't used. A target didn't move. An attack never came. Absence becomes evidence. Morale is tested differently when there's no clear way out. The team has to carry belief forward without reinforcement. No promise of relief. No guarantee of rest. Confidence becomes internal, built on shared understanding rather than external reassurance. Logistics become personal. Ammunition is counted carefully. Food is rationed without discussion. Water is shared instinctively. Each resource is treated as if it must last longer than expected because it probably will. Waste feels dangerous. Movement becomes strategic rather than tactical. There's no rush toward extraction coordinates. Routes are chosen to avoid patterns. Places are selected for concealment, not convenience. The team blends into the environment, not as camouflage, but as intent. Victory without extraction also strips away ceremony. There's no applause, no visible marker that says this was worth it. The satisfaction is internal, carried quietly by those who were there. That lack of recognition doesn't diminish the outcome. It clarifies motivation. The enemy often assumes success requires escape. They search roads, landing zones, predictable exits. When no extraction happens, confusion sets in. The absence of movement can be more disorienting than retreat. Staying changes the rules. Patience becomes an offensive tool. Waiting denies the enemy reaction. Silence denies them information. The team's ability to endure without being seen becomes part of the win. Psychologically, this kind of victory demands resilience. There's no immediate release of tension. The stress lingers. Sleep is shallow. Alertness never fully fades. Yet function continues. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Trust deepens in these moments. Each teammate becomes proof that endurance is shared. No one is carrying the weight alone. The bond isn't verbalized. It's reinforced through consistent action. Someone always watching. Someone always ready. Victory without extraction also means accepting uncertainty as permanent rather than temporary. There's no clear line between mission and aftermath. The mission continues as long as presence matters. That ambiguity is uncomfortable, but it's also freeing. The team adapts to the idea that completion isn't a moment, it's a condition. Eventually, movement resumes. Not as escape, but as transition. The team shifts position, alters posture, blends again. The lack of extraction doesn't mean being trapped. It means redefining freedom as the ability to choose the next move. In this kind of victory, survival is not the sole metric. Survival is assumed. The real measure is effectiveness without support, impact without visibility, completion without applause. When they finally leave the area, if they do, there's no celebration. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the objective no longer needs them there. The world moves on unaware, unchanged on the surface, while something underneath has been altered permanently by people who didn't need a helicopter to finish what they started.